you're recording.
All right. Well, welcome back, Ted. This is the second recording, and I want to dive a little bit more about the community. So, would you mind comparing San Gabriel and Arcadia? Maybe the size of your farm in San Gabriel and Arcadia?
You have to remember that when I lived in San Gabriel, by the time I moved out, from the time I was born to the time I left there, I was about 7 or 8 years old when I left
San Gabriel.
San Gabriel.
How big was your farm compared to Arcadia's?
I would say that at San Gabriel, I just always thought it was 25 acres, but it might be a little bit, but it was pretty good size. In Arcadia, it was a smaller farm. I would say 2.5, maybe 3 acres. Between 3 and 4 acres. It was pretty good size anyway. There were Japanese farmers all the way around at that point.
Did you have a relationship with any of these farmers? Did you talk to anybody?
I was very close to the Sakamoto families, which was on the next farm. And like I say, there were several boys, and there were a couple of boys my age, and they would spend more time over there than on the farm, our farm. And I started going out and having more to do with them. And in the interim, I wasn't exposed to very many Japanese up to that point. But there didn't seem to be problems. They managed to make a few friends, but still the bulk of them remained Caucasians for some reason or other. But even in Japanese school, I didn't make up too many friends for some reason or other. But I think one of the things was that I didn't care for Japanese school, and the very atmosphere that I was raised in. But in Arcadia was different. The school was right next to our farm. And so by the time those guys caught up with me, it was maybe a year or so after they moved over there, and these 3 guys approached me, the same guys. I don't know whether they're the same or not. And so 2 of them came over and started to talk to me, and the other guy would come back on his hands and knees. And I thought, oh, here we go. And I was surprised at my reaction. No, I guess I wasn't surprised. So I kind of leaned over and I go, bam! I kicked this guy in the back. And I looked at the ringleader and I said, well, I had a plan. If he raised a hand, I was going to jump on him, start beating the hell out of him, and if they had to kill me to stop me, that's how much I hated that thing. But all of a sudden, they just turned around and they left. It just changed my life just like that. After that, I decided I better learn how to protect myself. And then they offered boxing. I took up boxing, and I got healthier and stronger, and all of a sudden I grew. And like I say, I never went out for sports. because I was always looking for ways to make money and working around the area. So one day I was looking around the neighborhood and I came run across this. There were racing horses and training horses, so I looked over and I studied what they were doing. I said, oh, I can do that. So I casually walked over one day, and I had a dog. I always had a dog, And I'd tell him, now you wait here. I went across there. The big farm, the ranch was there, but right next to it there was a smaller one. So I went over there and asked for a job. He said, have you worked with horses? Oh yeah. I live on the farm, Walk behind the farm or the horse all the time. Wasn't the truth, but that's what I told him. I got a job. And I don't know how much I was making. Maybe a couple dollars a week for all I remember. But that was the start of my thing. And I started doing this, started to raise and train horses and exercise them, and that and school, my work at our own little farm, I did that too, but they always had priority because that's where the money came from. And I worked all the way through high school, paid my way through high school, and that's what I did. I bought my own car.
What was the name of the elementary school and the high school in Arcadia?
The first school was Holly Street School. That was a grammar school. There was First Avenue School. There was a little upper grader, and then the high school was at Monrovia, Arcadia, Duarte High School. That's the little three cities together. And that's when I was going to, and you had to go to the bus, but I couldn't find enough time for working. So eventually I bought a car or had a bicycle, but I would go on my own. Eventually I bought a car, and that's how I got into the horses. And working with horses, and I pretty much help support the family. As a matter of fact, I said, well, we have a ice box here. I said, there's a lot of food going to waste. He says, I can buy a refrigerator on time. Says, so I bought a refrigerator on time, and I took pay for it. I was making enough money and so forth to do that. So as time went on, I used to get the mares, and then I'd run on a pony, and I'd drag her around the tracks, exercising her and so forth. One day, I guess the mare wasn't too good a whatever, but when I gave her reins to this guy, the other guys take away. All of a sudden I realized she was aiming her butt at the pony where I was sitting. She let fly with both, and I just didn't have time to get my leg out of the way. So she caught me right through my riding shoes and took a niche out of my shin bone. And I didn't feel very much pain, but by the time I realized that I was hurt, took my boot off. The boot was full of blood, so I went. Took me to emergency and gave me tetanus and so forth. And when I was recuperating, and like I say, I didn't have too many Japanese friends, and the other guys that were working there were all white guys. So one of the guys came over one day and he said, Ted, I said, here's a card here. He says, my outfit's looking for some help. Says, just take this, just tell them that I sent you. So I took that and went over to a street. It was on just outside of downtown LA. By then I had a car and everything. And trying to think of the name again. But anyway, so I went there and presented my name, and so they gave me a job. They didn't ask me my experience or nothing, and they just put me right to work, and during drill presses and doing this and doing that, and I started out at something like 17, 16, I don't know, dollars a week. Not quite full time, but anyway, I was started working there and making more money. And then I noticed that there was another Nisei guy working further inside, and he was working on the big machines. So I figured, well, maybe, they know how Japanese kids are. So they asked me if I had another Japanese kids somebody that so I asked my brother, I says, there's a chance for me to get a job here. And he says, no, he says, I make $27 a week managing fruit stands. And so I said, well, you can start at 25 or 27 or more. So why don't you just go there and apply and see what happens. Next thing I know, he's working there. That was just before the war, maybe a month, 2 months before the war. So by the time then I kept getting promoted to another job, and pretty soon, right near the, just before December 7th actually it was, I was promoted to an engine lathe, operating a lathe. And as I'm working, and as I'm on the day shift, working 8 hours, and there's a guy working on the night shift, working 9 hours. So as I'm producing these things, and I said, well, gee, I don't know, they tell me we'll do it this way. I could eliminate this step and so forth, and I did. And then I kept noticing that, there's somebody always watching what I'm doing. And then and when I see them, I do all the right process and everything, and they're respecting the things I was making. And then it was, I don't know whether it was just before or just after Pearl Harbor. But anyway, they told me that I was outproducing the night shift guy by over 30%. I didn't know that. So they gave me a raise, and then the war came, and I actually saw, I guess it was a false alarm or something, but something was floating up there, and there were shooting, and by then I was on a night shift, so I was watched it. That was they were just shooting at whatever was up there, and there was a big publicity that I don't know what the result was, but anyway. So then in the meantime, my sister had, that just older than I, just a few months earlier, she had gone to Pennsylvania, or her husband was in the chick sexing business. So she had moved on. She was moved to Pasadena, not Pasadena, Pennsylvania. And so I was making 27, pretty soon I was 30. And by the time the war came going on, I was making $54 a week. And I was telling my sister, you know, it's great money. She says, boy, you should save money because you'll never make money like that. But anyway, actually, the Secret Service, or the FBI man, came over to the house, and he introduced himself, and had dual citizenship. Not dual citizenship, they called it that. And what had happened was that my brother was dual citizenship, and the Japanese government wanted to register to the man until when he became of age, which is 21. And when I became 21, evidently they took his name off. My father did, put my name on there, and the FBI was interested in it. And I told them, well, I didn't know that I had dual citizenship, and as a matter of fact, I was so upset. I says, I really was unhappy about it. And so this is an agent now. He explains that your neighbor's friends were with you when you had this thing, or they knew all about my background. And I didn't think any more about it, why they were doing that, but then I realized that we were in a war. So I was making more money and more money, and I was going to make a career if I could get a deferment. And then the draft came, and then the war came, and then I tried, and then the evacuation started coming up. So I tried to volunteer because all my Caucasian friends were getting into the military. But I guess I was turned down because they wouldn't recruit me. So eventually the evacuation came around. And then we were moved out to Wyoming, and from there I was there for a while. By then I had a car and everything. I sold my car. Of course, we left the farm, and I went into camp. And then after a while I decided to I'd go out and work. So I decided, well, I better go out and see how things are on the outside. So I volunteered to go into the pea harvest in Washington. So I went up there, worked hard to get made extra money and so forth. And there was I wasn't treated too bad. I went with 2 other guys. But the only guy that was really kind of nasty to us was a Nisei guy. Evidently he was a farmer there, and he was trucking he was a pea harvest, and then he was picking up the peas and bring it to the pea machine, and then we would be putting it in there, and for some reason he didn't like us or something, and like we were gangsters from the big city, and he would really almost want to fight us. I don't know why. So finally we got to the point where I says, I'll tell you what, anytime he's scheduled to come, let's jam this machine. You put too much stuff in it, it'll jam it, then the guy, the man that's working it has to go out and take all that thing out and unplug it. So we had a time so that, and then while they're just doing that, the rest of us guys, there's 1 or 2 old guys on the machine, we'd sit, wait, and he'd be sitting there, when we look at him, whether he finally got the message or not, I don't know, but he changed.
What year was that, and when did you move back to San Gabriel Valley?
Now, that was in 1940, early 46. Well into 1946. No, I'm sorry, 1941 is the day of the war, isn't it? So must have been 42. Now, don't forget now, we're at war now. And we were evacuated, and then it was from the relocation center where I went to work on the pea harvest. And when I came back, the food was so-so, and war was going on. It all seemed far away, like we were isolated, and never heard too much about the war. We were doing what we do, and so after I went back into the camp, just went around there, and some man grabbed me and he says, you look like you can do a day's work. I look at him, and he's looked like a hillbilly, and a heavy black beard, and talking to us about the working, and he says, the wife ain't afraid to put out the victuals. And I turned around and said, victuals? That's food, right? Yeah. Yeah, and my wife ain't afraid to put the good victuals. Says, let's go. So the war's going on. There's not any sign that they're going to draft us or anything. So, but I figured, well, they were asking for volunteers. So I said, it's just a question of time. So we went to work in this logging camp. The camp was just a camp, saws and so forth. The toilets were 2-holers, those little stands. No electric light in the cabins where we were living. Dirty. We had to clean it all up. But anyway, but food was good. She was great. So I figured, well, worked, and he was a cook. he would shortchange us. He would go poaching, and he'd bring us out to poach, and killing deers and so forth. We'd go fishing. He'd have us sit on our own time and so forth. But anyway, so the food is good, and we worked hard. Before these, he used to go to the county jail, bail those guys out, and would bring them out and work them, and they ain't worth a poop, So when we first went out there, he's telling us, says, "Be kid," he said, "any of these natives bother you, let me know, And this is in the mountains, so we're all thinking, natives, there must be Indians out here, bows and arrows and stuff. It wasn't that he was talking about the other people. But anyway, one day, we're going back to his yard, and a truck zooms in him and stops him. And he gets out and says, "God damn you, Prevost," the guy's name was Prevost. And he comes out there and he's carrying a gun. And I said, "Oh my God," that was the time I was alone with him. And I says, he comes out and says, "God damn you, you're stealing," and all that kind of stuff. And they argue with you, and I knew there was a gun in the glove compartment. And I'm just sitting there, oh my God, someone's going to get hurt. Finally, he take a look, and I don't see any of the stuff. What we were doing, we were going out and loading up pipes. But on this trip, we happened to just gathered up the pipe, and we had stacked it. We hadn't put them on the truck yet. And so they called it you goddamn Prevost, goddamn you white, and all that kind of stuff. And that's how I felt. He was a kind of a crook. But anyway, so as time went on, and we were going, and the victuals were good. We worked 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and sometimes on weekends, and for just a little bit of spending money, nothing but the food was good, and the strong and the work was tough. And I worked there for about 6, 7 months, and all we're thinking of, the three of us there, is that what my plan was, I'm not going to volunteer, but sooner or later they're going to draft us. And that's because I had volunteered before, and they wouldn't accept me, so well, screw them. But anyway, so I worked there, and then finally I got my notice from my home office in LA, and I was A1, subject to draft. And I was up, sawing up trees and stuff on the mountainside when he came up and I told him, I said, "John, I got my notice from my draft board. Says, I'm going to be drafted. Don't worry, Ted, you get to a deferment." And I woke him up to him, and I leaned up to him and said, "John, I'd rather be anywhere in this world than sitting on this friggin' mountain with you." And I leaned back, and he didn't say a word. Turned around and left. Sure enough, as soon as I got my notice that I was reclassified, the three of us, I said, we were just waiting anyway. And so we decided to quit. went back to camp, had a beard like this, had muscles. I was strong enough to wrestle a bear. Then I was one of the first ones to be called. It was first guys, first group, there's a few, and then right back there was about 30 of us were called. And they would send us to Denver. And there were a bunch of naval officers, doctors, you know. And you could sense when they saw us, you know, that you know, they didn't care for us at all. I could sense it, you know. So we're going through all this process, and then finally at the end, we're all stripped naked, bare ass, and then we're all lined up. And they said, bend over and spread your cheeks. So we bent over and spread our cheeks. Some of them must have gone on like this because I could hear something. Then somebody else, spread your ass, you stupid sons of bitches. And I looked at each other, and some of the guys are doing it on purpose. Anyway, half of us failed or didn't pass the physical. But I was one of them passed, and I wanted to pass. I wanted to go. So I went back into camp, and as we were stopped at a little town called, I forgot the name of the town again. I'm kind of terrible with my memory. We stopped there, and a Japanese guy in an air uniform sat next to me. And I said, "You must be Ben Kuroki," because I heard of him. You know who he is. He's the war hero from the Europe. And he says, "My name is Smith." Totally ignored us. Me especially. And I pretty much kind of recognized him, you know. The Air Force wasn't taking Niseis, but he was obviously a Nisei, and he was wearing a Air Force uniform. So I figured, he says, "You must be," but he went into camp, I understand, and he got all kinds of negative response, especially from the Nisei. When he told them, says, he's the one that flew, they schedule you for 25 bombing trips. And he volunteered for 5 more over and above that, and he got all kinds of decorations for European for. So he was being transferred, and he was volunteered to go to the Pacific. And he was telling the Issei's that he was going to bomb Tokyo, I guess, because I didn't listen to him because I didn't want to hear him and the way he was acting. I didn't want to hell with him. But I understand later on that he was sent by the Air Force or the military to visit 2 camps to sell them the idea of volunteering or get them to serve in the military. And that was his first stop. And the response when they heard that he was a traitor to them, because especially it says the older people, that he was going to be bombing those people. But anyway, after that, I was waiting for my call after I passed the physical. So in the interview, I decided, well, they were looking for volunteers for the military, the MIS. So I decided, well, I got 10 years of Japanese schooling, so I'm going to write a little note in Japanese the best I could. But I hated it, I wasn't very good, but anyway, I sent it, and I got an immediate reply, come. So I said, well, just come, I have to go to Savage. Savage was a little town, outside of Minnesota, or Minneapolis. So I had to pay my own way. And that was first time out alone. The first time, there was no big deal. This time I had to go to Billings town, from there to the small town and so forth. But anyway, I got there, and that's how I got into the MIS. From there, we were sent down to Alabama for training. When I took the training down there, and the guys that I trained with, I don't know how many of us were there, but we just did our best, We had shooting scores and so forth. We always took top scores and everything. The Hawaiian guys, they had the money. They would go into town and stuff. Well, I didn't have any money, or we didn't have much money, we stayed. But when I got out of that camp, got into to go back to Minnesota again, our own, and here we had uniforms. And first time I realized that I'm accepted, I was proud I had my uniform, and they let you out first, and you got the treatment. And I was treated just like any other. And I said, hey, this is great. So I went up to Minnesota, went to school, had trouble with a couple of fellow Niseis. Aside from them, I got along pretty well. And then I was getting ready for shipment. Then I had a girlfriend from Heart Mountain who lived in Cleveland. And we were corresponding, so I felt, when you get ready and the war's going on, you figure, you'd like to have somebody to come home to, maybe you should marry somebody, and so that's how we were thinking. So my oldest sister, had moved to New Jersey by then, to a Seabrook farm, frozen food place, farmers, and I told her that I was thinking of proposing, and she wrote right back, whatever you do, come see me first before you do anything. So I wrote back, well, I'm old enough now, so if I want to marry her, I'll marry her. Soon I got a wire, your sister passed away. And I thought, oh my God, so I got emergency leave and went all the way back to Philly. And then from Philly, my brother and my other sister was in Philly, and we drove out to where she was on the farm in New Jersey. And when they just had the final service, and there was an item cut, a newspaper item in my papers, and it says so-and-so had committed suicide. I said, look, those sons of bitches. Why in the hell they publish things like that? My father and her husband told me that she had passed away with cerebral hemorrhage. And I said, oh my God, what kind of crap is this, you know? And I went back, went overseas. Years later, I come back. First came back, when it was time for me to come back, I was wondering whether I should be coming back or should I stay. What am I going to do when I go back? I had no idea how things were. So the second Christmas after the war ended, a group of us fellows came back to see how things were. Things were not that good. So we went back, and I decided to stay for a few more years. And then I would wait till I took my discharge overseas, and I went to work for the military. And so I had no money, but that's the reason I did it. So I saved money, and I had some money deducted from my salary to send to my sister in Pennsylvania. So in 1951, it was time for me to come back and enroll in school. So that's what I did.
All right, Ted. We're going to end it right there.
Yeah.
And before we end the tape, do you have any questions for me before I go? But we also would love to have you come back to do a follow-up interview. And
yeah. Have you read my book at all, or have you had a?
I'll take a look at it.
Huh?
But, I'll take a look at it.
But you have your own.
I don't have my own copy.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll leave you my copy.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So that concludes our interview for today.
Okay.
But, we would love to have you come back whenever you are available, and that way we can dive more into the community aspect. So
yeah.
Thank you, Ted, and this is the end of the interview.
Yeah.